Keith Bradsher, he's the Shanghai Bureau Chief for the New York Times, who recently traveled to Wuhan. Keith, I'm so glad you could be with us. I've been following your reporting. I ask you this first question somewhat wistfully. What was it like to return to Wuhan after it came to that grinding halt last year? What did it look like?
It was surprisingly like the Wuhan I remembered from trips there in 2019 and 2018, before the virus ever happened. It was extraordinary to be able to go into restaurants and have trouble finding a table because they were packed with people. The malls are packed with people. There are people walking around in the parks, but you don't find the desperation and depression that was there a year ago at the time of the lockdown. That said, there are still some people who are deeply happy. There's a small minority of people who lost loved ones or who were very sick themselves during the outbreak, and those remain unhappy. But overall, there's a surprisingly optimistic mood in Wuhan today.
And you say people were out in restaurants and on the streets. Was everyone wearing a mask for the most part?
When they were in the restaurants, they were not wearing masks, so they were all eating at their tables. Nobody in the whole place was wearing masks other than the serving staff. On the streets, people did tend to be wearing masks, but there has been a slight uptick lately in mask usage outdoors in China in the last really 3 weeks, because you've had a spate of cases in northern China. Now, we're still only talking about 100 cases a day, which is a small total compared to Canada and a tiny total compared to the United States, but it has caused some concern, and people are tending to wear masks when they're outdoors again now.
How did Wuhan do it? What can the rest of the world learn from Wuhan, China?
The question is whether the rest of the world would want to undertake such a draconian policy, but it was very effective, and it worked within several weeks in terms of wiping out the disease there. They divided everybody into 5 categories. People who were so severely ill that they required intubation, that's a breathing tube down into the lungs, were sent to ICU units, intensive care units at hospitals. People who required oxygen but could just have it through a normal mask on their face went to hospital beds. People who were not very sick or asymptomatic but tested positive went to live on bunks by the thousands and thousands put out in exhibition centers. Anybody who was a close contact of those people who were sick had to go into isolation in hotels, which were all taken over. So by the tens of thousands, they put people in total isolation in hotel rooms and wouldn't let them out for weeks. And then finally, everybody else had to stay home. Those who were not close contacts, but had, for any other reason, all 11 million people in Wuhan were required to stay in their homes.
Did you come away from that visit to Wuhan, and we were just looking at your pictures, with a sense of optimism that we can get through this? What were your feelings when you left?
Well, first of all, the photos were taken by a very talented photographer, not by me. But those are the photos in Saturday's New York Times in our big multi-page layout. But coming away from Wuhan, I think I did feel a sense of optimism. There is life after the pandemic, and the hope is just that more countries, more cities, can find a way, ideally with less dislocation, to bring the disease under control as well.
And one last question, Keith. Have they started vaccinating people against COVID-19 in Wuhan?
Almost none. There has been the beginnings of a national vaccine program for healthcare workers as a precaution. And then in addition, there's been a lot of vaccination in northern China, where you have, particularly in Beijing, a big effort to vaccinate a sizable chunk of the population to bring the outbreak there under control. Wuhan is ranked as a low priority location because it has not had any virus cases at all for a long time. And so there's not been a big vaccination effort there.
Wow, imagine that. That's something to to think about. Keith Bradsher, Shanghai Bureau Chief for the New York Times. Keith, thank you.